-15 degrees Celsius. The north wind hammers the thatched roof, smoke from the stew seeps through the cracks, the cow snorts beneath the floorboards, and the whole family presses tightly together on a wooden bed, tilted just enough so they don't slide off. No electricity, no double glazing, no modern heating. Just a few pieces of wood, clay, straw, coarse wool, and survival experience passed down through generations. If the hearth fire dies and the wind changes direction, what will they do to survive the night? When the rooster crows, will the door open to sunlight? Or to a grim tally of the small mistakes that let the frost win? Don't blink, because right after this, you'll see why the people with the fewest tools had the smartest anti-cold tech, and the final detail could literally save your life if you're ever trapped in an unheated house. Modern people love to scoff at the shabby huts of medieval peasants, but those were thermal laboratories in disguise. The first trick was right under their feet. They didn't build on the ground, they dug into it, setting the floor anywhere from a foot to half a leg's length below the surface. It sounds like nothing, but the surrounding earth becomes a natural thermal blanket. This sunken floor avoids ground-level drafts. While all the heat rising from their bodies, the stew pot and the livestock gets trapped in that small volume. Picturing a muddy pit? Hold on, they lined the floor with wood, dry straw, and a fine layer of ash to suck up moisture. When I say a million little tricks, this is it. Nothing epic, but all of it added up to the difference between life and death. The walls weren't just bare wood. They wove a frame of flexible branches like a giant basket that's wattle. Then they smeared on the daub. A lovely slurry of clay, straw, fibers, and, yes, you guessed it, fermented animal shit for extra binding. It stinks to high heaven, but when dry, this wall of crap and clay becomes a breathable jacket. It cuts the wind, blocks driving moisture, but still lets the wall breathe so condensation doesn't build up inside. Reconstructions show this wall significantly buffers day-night temperature swings. Windows were tiny, and yes, that was on purpose. They weren't afraid of light, they just refused to hemorrhage heat. Ceilings were low, not because people were short, but to keep the life-giving warmth right at breathing level. Opening the door meant wiping out a day's work, so the habit of going in and out in bursts, opening and closing it like special ops, was dead serious. The center of everything was the hearth, right in the middle of the floor. Don't just call it a fireplace. This was the home's heat router, its spiritual shoulder to cry on, the neighborhood social media feed. It cooked, it heated, it dried clothes, it fought the damp. So where did the smoke go without a proper chimney? Straight up. And here's what modern people get wrong. That layer of warm smoke pooling at the top, stinging the eyes, sure was a feature. It protected the thatch from insects, stopped mold, and created a smoke blanket that trapped heat. Thatched roofs that were regularly cured like this lasted surprisingly long. You say suffocating? They deliberately opened vents at specific times to exchange air, balancing warmth and freshness. This wasn't guesswork. It was a skill passed down by touch, by the sound of the embers, by the look in an eye that knew the fire was hungry. The layout was pure science. Beds were placed far from drafts, away from the door, away from the smoke hole. The wall next to the bed was often covered with thick textiles, animal hides, or even a woven straw mat, creating a small chamber within the larger room, reducing the volume of air they had to heat. The roof was steep enough for snow to slide off, but not so steep the thatch went with it. And the house faced the sun. In high latitudes, the main door faced the low-hanging winter sun. When sunlight is rare, every ray is property. Now, for the daily rhythm, this is where the discipline kicks in. Winter wasn't do whatever, whenever. The real work was concentrated at midday, when the weak sun peaked. As the knife-sharp evening wind picked up, work moved indoors, weaving, mending tools, telling stories. Those twilight councils weren't just meetings, they were human body radiators. A few dozen bodies crammed together, and the room temperature visibly rose. Turns out, meetings are useful. If the village had a communal oven, that was its second heart. On set days, the whole village brought their dough. The massive, hot oven was used to bake dense black bread, dry clothes, and bleed a little extra warmth to the surrounding huts. A bell or signal rang when the oven was at peak temp, and everyone swarmed disciplined like an assembly line. Winter doesn't indulge the sloppy. Food preservation was a long war, They dug cellars lined with wood, creating zones for different vegetables, layered with dry straw and ash. And they monitored them with the vegetables. Sensitive roots were placed in warmer spots. Sprouting-prone ones went higher. They'd check them weekly, moving them like chess pieces. No thermometer, just hands that could tell the weather by feeling the skin of a turnip. The pottage pot was the energy bank in the middle of the room. It was always simmering. Today, add turnips. Tomorrow, dried beans. The next, scraps of grain. The key wasn't glamour, it was endurance. You hear simmered for days and shudder, but that constant boiling was a form of primitive sterilization. More importantly, it was always ready. In the freezing night, you just ladled it out. No starting a fire from scratch. How to eat for warmth? A meal at dawn to wake up the body's furnace. The big meal at midday. A small meal before bed to stop your core temp from dropping at 3 a.m. Fermentation was the demigod of the cold. Sauerkraut, pickled roots, thick, sludgy beer, all of it, preserving food while adding calories. If you thought peasants just drank, you missed the philosophy, turning the perishable into the permanent, the bland into the rich. And then, sleep, where the real science of the sheets was written in sweat and breath. They didn't lie flat. The wooden bed was raised a foot or two off the floor to escape the cold air sink, and the platform itself was slightly inclined to cuddle bodies together. A thick layer of straw changed seasonally, topped with wool, hide, anything that held heat. Sleeping together was literal. 3 to 6 people pressed skin to skin, the smallest and weakest in the middle, the adults on the edges taking turns facing the cold. Don't romanticize it. It was smelly, there was snoring, the smoke stung your eyes. But with the wind howling outside, the feeling of being alive beat the hell out of perfume. Ever laugh at spooning? For them, it was thermal mathematics. Reduce the body's surface area exposed to the cold, and maximize the heat-transferring contact surface. When the person on fire watch duty came back to bed, they'd slip into the coldest spot. The rule was to plug the cold gaps, leave no empty space. Clothes were a mobile wall. Wool was left unwashed to keep its natural, water-repelling lanolin. The inner layer, often nettle fiber, was light to wick sweat away from the skin. The outer layers were coarse and thick to block wind. The hood wasn't an accessory. It was a jacket for the head, neck, and shoulders, the body's worst heat loss zones. Straw was stuffed in shoes for insulation, and animal fat was smeared on the outside to make water slide right off. Bringing the animals inside was the next chapter in manual HVAC. A single cow breathing steadily on the other side of a thin wall was a biological furnace. A pair of oxen nearby, a few sheep, chickens in a draft-free corner. The floor of their pen was a deep layer of straw and ash to cut the smell, turned daily so the top stayed dry while the bottom layer composted. Yes, they were sleeping just above a slow-burning compost pile, and that decomposition was generating life-saving heat. Some huts even had rotating feed troughs. Fill them from the outside, then spin them inwards. No need to hold the door open. Livestock, steam, fire, and breathing walls, the whole house became a microclimate. Warm and humid, just enough to keep skin from cracking and walls from molding. They weren't blind optimists. They had safety rituals. At night, the firekeeper would bank the embers, burying the glowing coals in a deep layer of ash to preserve the fire overnight. In the morning, you just blew on it, and the flames roared back. No wasting fuel on starting over, but don't pinkwash this. The smoke was brutal on the eyes and throat. The damp walls made hands crack and bleed. One stray spark on a dry, windy day could eat the entire roof. Animals meant smell and noise. The person on watch falls asleep. The whole family freezes. Winter does not forgive. Back to that first night. The wind slams the hut. The fire sputters. The father leaps up, kneels, rakes the ashes, listening for the faint hiss of a live ember. 2 handfuls of dry, split twigs laid in a grid, shielded with his palm. The mother pushes the stew pot closer, adding its radiant heat. The oldest child arches their back, becoming a temporary wall. The cow below lets out a low moan, its warm breath rising through the floorboards. The flame stands up. Nobody speaks, but the entire family exhales. You just witnessed a resurrection ritual performed hundreds of thousands of times. Now, The part you've been waiting for? The modern lessons. 1. Shrink the space you need to heat. Use a thick curtain to make a sleep nook. 2. Steady heat beats intense heat. 3. Layers, layers, layers. 4. Sync your schedule with nature. 5. Respect the simple hot stew. You might argue, were they really as scientific as you say? This science doesn't need a gleaming lab. This is trial and error, written over hundreds of winters in the cracks in a wall, in the death of a chicken from a draft, in the survival of a child who was moved to the middle of the bed just in time. We read it with 21st century eyes and see thermodynamics. They just called it how things are done. And if you're watching this in a shiny glass apartment, shivering because the power's out, that peasant science suddenly looks like solid gold. The negative 15 degrees Celsius night fades. Someone unlatches the door, not wide open, but correctly, angled against the wind they've learned. The night's hoarded warmth spills out in a blue cloud. They made it. Not by magic, but by 1,000 tiny techniques that became magic. Your turn. If you had to survive one freezing night in an unheated room, which 3 tricks from this medieval tech pack would you choose first? Comment your top 3 below, and if you love decoding the science of the common man like this, hit subscribe. Next time, we're stepping into a stone castle, colder than the air outside, and asking, how does a knight sleep warm when his armor hasn't even cooled down? It's about to get even colder and hotter than tonight.